Pickaxe.
Hello, and welcome back to the Review of Death, a Doctor Who podcast and your fortnightly home for Doctor Who news and reviews. I'm Matthew Toffolo, I'm joined as always by Billy Garratt-John. It's spooky season, Billy.
Oh, do you like Halloween?
All right.
Yeah, it's different when you're older, isn't it? Because you don't get dressed up, you don't go to parties, you don't... Well,
No.
You do, actually. You do that with yogs and stuff.
Oh, yeah, occasionally. Yeah. Went as Davros, probably get cancelled for doing that these days.
Probably not a great idea, is it? What other cancelable Doctor Who characters are there? I mean,
Lee Seng-Chang.
Lee Seng-Chan's probably not a good one. Marvick Chen you should probably avoid as well. But
Noel Clark.
we are talking about Doctor Who's scariest moment of fucking hell. Oh, if you want to laugh, go and check out his Instagram. It's a bit Alan Partridge these days, isn't it?
Every so often you'll send me a reel and I'm like, oh, what's Billy sent me? And I'm like, okay. what's he saying this time? That one of him sat on the toilet.
That one of him sat on the toilet getting his ass jetted. Yeah, that was pretty bad. Anyway, let's talk about
That's a scary
some
moment.
slightly scarier things, oddly. To me, Doctor Who and getting a little bit of a creepness out of it and getting a little bit of a fright is a big deal, because I'm not a horror connoisseur. I'm not really into my horror films. I'm not really into my blood splatter and gore and all that sort of stuff. So the creepiness of Doctor Who is a big thing for me.
Yeah.
And I think was probably one of the things that I was first attracted to about the show was it's a kind of safe creepiness, isn't it? Safe scares.
Yeah.
But when it needs to give you a wallop to the spooky senses, it does it.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Yeah. I mean, it was never really something... I always say I was never really scared by Doctor Who. Like you said, it's that sort of safeness. But I mean, there were moments where I was genuinely terrified. Yeah. I mean, to the point where I couldn't watch certain stories for a long time. About last week. So, yeah. So, I mean, I don't know, how should we do this? Do we just want to tackle our list of spooky spooks?
We've got a couple of spooky spooks on both sides, and then we're going to turn to suggestions left by Rodders on Twitter.
Nice.
So, I'm going to go first.
Before we go?
Action figures.
Oh, yeah. So Doctor Who, 14th Doctor and Millie Gibson action figures came out.
15th.
What did I say? 14th?
It shows how much you fucking care about this show at the moment.
Yep. Yeah. So they released these toys of two people and they put it in Doctor Who packaging. 15th Doctor and Ruby Sunday figures are out now. They're really, really cool. They're great. They're probably the best action figures that character have done in terms of articulation and overall design. Really lovely stuff. You'd seen them in advance, hadn't you, Billy? I gave you a little sneak
on a
peek.
blurry Zoom call. They look
blurry
great.
Zoom, yeah. So those are cool. Those are out now. New B&M sets are also out now. Not that you can find them in Bristol for love nor money.
No.
Yeah, been chatting to TARDIS Monkey, and they've been saying, no, can't find them anywhere. Tried all the bloody B&Ms in Bristol. Nothing.
Gutted.
Yeah, crap. So I was very, very lucky that Jack Evans was on hand in Wales, and he secured me all 3 sets. So God bless him.
Excellent. Good work, Jack.
Yeah, so thank you for that. Reviews of those sets will be coming soon as I can find time to take the photos, record the review, edit the review, upload the review. Yeah. Write the theme tune, sing the theme tune.
Write the theme tune, sing the theme tune. I was waiting for that.
Yeah.
Excellent. I don't know if there's anything else that's been going on. I mean, there was BBC... No, not BBC. It was the Welsh BAFTAs, and Shooty Gatwa won an award.
Yeah, what did he win?
I think it was best hairline. No, I think it was best best
Arbs.
Best arms.
I was going to say abs. I was going to say arms.
Best arms. I mean, on both counts, sure, yeah.
I'm sure he'd be happy with either.
I'm sure he would. But he won best actor.
Okay.
We didn't really talk about the whole Graham Norton thing because there was stuff going on about.
Oh yeah.
Did they not say that Series 3 is going ahead in production and all that sort of stuff?
Yeah. So I thought that it was bollocks. I thought people were mad, but apparently they did edit it, didn't they? Or did they not?
Yeah.
They did edit it because he said that they were going to start filming. So perhaps something is happening in terms of the recommissioning of Doctor Who, but maybe it's because maybe Disney aren't interested, or I don't know, maybe it's being produced a different way. Who knows? I'm sure we'll find out sooner rather than later. But the fact that Shooty seems to think that they're filming next year is a positive sign.
It is. I did see something the other day. Well, that's relative. I did see something the other day about the war between the land and the sea maybe coming out in 2026 if there's a gap year.
If there's a gap year, right. That seems to be just the Sea Devils chucking rubbish at people. That's
I know.
Every time there's like a leak from set, it's like, oh, there's more rubbish. Oh, they're throwing more rubbish. Like, what is this? Some sort of bloody Benny Hill sketch or something?
Honestly, I mean, obviously we can't tell what it's going to be like from blurry videos taken by people behind the scenes, but I don't have a lot of hope for this series. I know that's a pessimistic thing to say, considering we don't know anything about it, but I am not really that engaged by what we're seeing, because it's like it doesn't seem to be one thing or the other. Again, we don't know anything about it, but it doesn't seem to be like very audacious in its approach to location work. It just looks like, you know, any modern drama, and then you've got all this rubbish all over the place. So is that kind of a indication it's going to be a bit childish? Is that
they should have shot it at my uncle's flat? There's plenty of rubbish there.
They should have. Absolutely. But I don't know. I'm not really. I was never on board with the idea. I always thought the idea was a little bit odd. And nothing has so far from the stuff that's been not leaking, but obviously been shot on set. I'm not particularly turned on by any of it.
No, and we haven't even seen a Sea Devil yet, which is a shame.
I think that'll be an indicator of where it is tonally. If it's a guy in a rubber suit or if it's some sort of human Sea Devil hybrid.
Yeah, I mean, I hope they don't go down that route, and I hope they don't go down any like CGI route either, because it's gonna look a bit naff. But hey ho, we'll see. You know, as soon as I get a glimpse of those blue dress wearing rubber buggers,
it'll be fine.
I'll be happy. Yeah, like this is it. This is what I'm here for.
Absolutely. It won't happen, but there we go.
No,
right.
No, probably won't.
Doctor Who's Scary. Oh, and season 25.
Yeah, season 25's out at the end of the month, so not long to wait. Really looking forward.
Not long to wait now, and we'll get around to reviewing something from season 25 when Matt's had the chance to watch a certain special edition of a certain story.
Yeah,
and there might be a certain hanky wrangler with us. For that, I would hope so.
Yes, I'm sure he will pop in, give his 2 pennyworth.
Excellent. So, Doctor Who's Scariest Moments. I'm going to go for my first one off the top.
Go for it.
Because we talked about it a lot on the Doctor Who night commentary that we did on the Patreon. Yeah. But the Carnival of Monsters segment with all the shots of classic Doctor Who monsters set to classical music was a real sort of, you know, something that was searing onto my brain as, that's spooky, that's scary.
Yeah.
But one thing that really got me, because it came completely out of context to the wider implications of the whole story. I mean, they give a little bit of a Cliff Notes version of what happens in the episode. But when they do Morbius...
Oh, yeah.
And Sarah Jane pulls the curtain back and we get the shot of the writhing Morbius body in bed with her head. That, you know, is just horrendous. and it's a great cliffhanger.
Yeah.
So good. But I think putting this list together, I realised the thing that spooks me is body horror. It's like, you know,
oh, for sure. Yeah.
You know, grim things happening to people, or stuff sort of glanced or kind of implied as happening to somebody off screen, or, you know, whatever it is.
Yeah.
So yeah, that is definitely my number one. And watching it on a wonky VHS tape where you're kind of trying to look through a sea of tracking and you know, of noise, and it would have been an earlier print and a poor restoration of that story's reel anyway. And so you're sort of squinting through the lack of fidelity in the image, you know, and you're like, what the fuck is that? You know, it's a shame almost that I was watching a video about it the other day. Like, there's been a 4K AI upscale of Aliens, and it sort of lost its grainy.
And that's what it needs. That's part of the
snowy effect.
That's part of the joy of it.
Exactly. Yeah. So I'm going to put that up there for me as a scary moment.
That's a great one. I hadn't thought about that, and that's like such a sort of classic sort of cerebral moment where, you know, anyone can relate to that idea of like I said, pulling back the curtain and there's something horrible lurking behind it. So you know, you can't go wrong. One of my earliest memories, I was probably about the same age that you were watching Doctor Who Night, but Deadly Assassin, the first time we see the Master's face, I vividly remember running out of the front room and hiding under the dining room table because it was just so scary. But I wasn't. It was like that initial shock. Do you know what I mean? It wasn't like, oh my god, I can't watch this again. It was just that initial shock of seeing that face. And it's so well shot, all that stuff. You know, the close up on the eyes and the you know, the first glance of his hand, and it's all manky and mangled. So gotta put my ping pong eyeballed friend, the Master, up there.
I think we forget that. I know that maybe I'm going to sound like a fucking Brexiteer here, but we were living in less sensitive times to a degree, you know.
Yeah.
But that was going out at 5:30 at night.
Yeah.
No wonder the fucking older generation are fucked in the head. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like,
and the funny thing is, it was my dad had a mate at work who liked Doctor Who, but he never like liked Doctor Who, but he always used to say, "Oh, I remember watching it as a kid" and all this sort of stuff. But I think he enjoyed it a little bit more than he let on, because he said, closeted Doctor Who fans, because he sort of said to my dad, he's like, "Oh, there was one with this guy in like a black cloak, and he had like a scary like skull face and these big eyes." And like Dad was like, "Do you know what he's chatting about?" I was like, "Well, it sounds like the Master and the Deadly Assassin." And he was like, "Yeah, that's it. That's the one." I was like, you know more than you're letting on if you recognise the title. Come on.
You've got a whole set of VHS tapes back home. You've got a bloody pin up a Nicola Bryant in your bedroom. Yeah. We know you. My dad's, one of his earliest memories and one of his scariest moments is the Master's face in the grandfather clock at the end of that story.
Yeah, there we go.
And that was like a kind of watershed, oh shit, this is frightening moment for him.
Spooky, isn't it? Yeah. Speaking of, I just bought a grandfather clock the other day. That was...
I saw.
Good. Yeah. Doesn't work.
When's the museum opening?
It was museum. I'm just gonna pin Peter Pat's face in the clock. There we go.
I think you should. That would look great. Okay. My next one, bit of a flashback to a story we reviewed recently.
Okay.
But I wanted to do something from Spearhead because I think the Autons are so creepy. Yeah. But thinking about it, like, obviously the massacre on the high street is iconic, but an easy choice. And also that's more of an action scene than like a scary moment, particularly. I was thinking the Auton breaking into the cottage, but then I remembered seeing the actor blink behind the gauze in the eyes, and it slightly ruined it for me.
It does, doesn't it? It takes it away.
It does. And I couldn't just select Autons generally in that story, like just shots of them, you know, thrashing through woodland. You know, that's enough for me. So I picked the Auton jumping out in front of the Jeep and killing the unit soldier.
Yeah.
Because
I don't think we brought that up in the review, like how gory that is, you know?
Especially for that time. It's like they went, right, we're in colour, so let's get the fucking claret out, you know, and like...
Yes,
his face is smashed against the window, and I think it's the... Again, when we were talking about that story, we were sort of talking about this the kind of journalistic shot from the hip element that you get with it. And I think, you know, obviously the camera spinning away from the Auton is a little bit like, all right, you know, we can't show it flipping, so you know, we've got to do something. But I think it's the barely glimpsed image of it stumbling out of the woods as the car comes down this track, and then it checking on him, making sure he's dead, and then taking the stuff out the boot. And I think that's it's a key part of the novelization as well. That from my memory, reading it, that's really well novelized, that section.
It's like Michael Myers, isn't it?
It is. It's sort of thing. Anything with a kind of expressionless face that gives nothing away is enough to spook me out. So I think the Autons had to be on my list somewhere, and that moment was it's the most visceral, it's the most kind of horror influenced, I think.
It's great. And like you said, that the sort of the coolness as it checks that the person's dead. It's doesn't
creepy. Even need to sort of like move it. It's just like, oh yeah, incompatible with life. Let's get this thing out of the boot.
He's fucked.
Ouch, brother, that hurts.
And the old dear, you know, Mrs. Seeley, she sells it, doesn't she? Later on, she's like, "Oh, he must have seen something horrible before he died."
Oh, you know, his eye hanging out and all that. Bloody hell.
Brilliant.
Yeah,
brilliant.
Grim.
Well, sticking with the Pertwee era, the story that I genuinely could not watch for years, Inferno. It petrified me. The Primords absolutely petrified me. The sounds that they made, I just had to hear the sounds and I was freaked out. The scene when the Doctor is in the jail when he's in Parallel Earth and he's in the jail and you see the hand of the guy in the bed next to him and it's all green and hairy and you're like, oh shit. And that whole sequence when he wakes up and then he starts breaking the bars. Oh, I can remember as a kid being petrified, like, oh my God, you know, this thing is going to get him. And he's locked in. He's locked in this thing, in this jail. Yeah, absolutely petrified me. Sounds just terrified me. Absolutely terrified me.
I get the laboured breathing being creepy.
Yeah.
But it's just they're just very hairy. You know, that's the kind hairy. Of the main thing about them.
Would you look at him there with his hairy hands?
With his hairy hands, they don't scare me, I have to say. But I think the location work in that story scares me more than anything else. You know, the fact that it's all like when they're climbing up onto the stanchions and the gangways and stuff, and firstly, you're thinking there's a lot of fucking condensation around. Someone's going to slip and hurt themselves. But it's desolate. And I was watching, for the first time in ages, I was watching a Doctor Who, like, a bit of VAM. And I watched Doctor Who and the Third Man from season 8 set, was it? I can't remember now.
Yes.
And I like the way that Matthew Sweet says it went from, you know, the horrors went from outside and outer space to in industrial estates and behind chain link fences. And I think that sort of desolation in that story really scares me. And the rolling lava obviously at the end and thinking, well, actually these characters are totally dispensable because we're in a different universe. So this is just the way it pans out for them. They're fucked. And that's kind of a real, you know, stomach drop moment of like, you know, they're probably all going to die here, you know?
Yeah. I mean, I can't remember. I saw something recently and someone did in an article or something, or it might have been on Twitter, and someone said, you know, the world ends, you know, the world actually ends and the characters that we know and kind of love, but, you know, it's not quite them. Yeah, they all get wiped out. And we're just like, oh, okay, there's no magic button that reverses it all. There's no. You know, there's no special thing that's going to suck all the lava back into the planet, like Beat the Meep. It's just, yeah, you've had it, my son.
Yeah.
So prepare for some singed eyebrows.
And a bit more than that, fucking hell.
A bit more
Okay, my next one is a story that is probably scary to some people for a completely different reason. But I've never been scared of clowns. So I'm going to say Mags transforming into a werewolf from The Greatest Show in the Galaxy. Again, another one of those clips where I saw it out of context first, just her head craning up and her standing up. And thinking, oh, that looks fucking cool. And then watching it and then seeing the shot in situ. Yeah. And then going, it's quite a scary moment. But I think I was of an age where it didn't scare me when I first saw it, but I was kind of like, oh yeah, that is creepy just by its nature. That is creepy,
yeah. And I think that's the same for like a lot of aspects of Doctor Who that, you know, it may not have like genuinely like, oh my God, I can't watch that. But you appreciate, oh yeah, that is scary. And for me, that was certainly one of them, Mags, for sure. Jonathan, you know, always used to say that as a 5-year-old absolutely petrified him. And understandably so, because, you know, the teeth, the eyes, it's really friggin' freaky. It's very on the knuckle. I agree. She can go up there as one of the spooks. Sticking with the 80s, and I imagine this is probably on your list as well, because I saw you post it on Twitter. Arthur Stengos from Resurrection of the Daleks.
It's not on my list, but because I assumed it was going to come up. Yeah. And I think we've mentioned it before. Yeah. And I wanted to give somebody else the chance to say it, because, that is... we've said it on the podcast. It's probably the most visceral, gory thing that's ever been in the show, and it is still shocking that it's, especially at a time where Doctor Who's head's on the chopping block. I wouldn't be surprised if, when they were making the decision of canning it, they went, "Did you see what they did in that Dalek last week?" Yeah, you know, and Michael Gray looking at it and going, "Oh, this is terrible. We've got to get rid of this show." It's horrendous. And it's so well done as well, which is, you know, it's the pulsing organ on the head, it's the horrible, like, metal bit in the teeth. All just comes together to make something so desperately unpleasant. And then, like, the performance as well of the guy, you know, he's sort of begging to die, but then you've got the Dalek element taking over. It's fantastic. It's really, really good, but my God, it's horrible. And also from that story, the mutant at the beginning that throttles the Doctor, that always petrified me. I always thought that was horrible. I wondered if that was going to come up. Yeah,
it's just, that story is just a bit unpleasant. I love it. It's one of my favourites for Collins' era, but they really did go, well, let's go hard or we'll go home.
It reminds me a little bit of, this is a recommendation for anyone who likes their sort of body horror stuff and they want something to watch for Halloween. Tetsuyo the Iron Man. This is Japanese.
Oh, I've heard of this.
Like science fiction horror movie. It's a guy who, like, basically wakes up one morning and he's got metal shit coming out of his face and out of his body, and it's gross. It's horrendous. But that sort of biomechanical thing, because you know, he's got, like you say, he's got the metal grill in his mouth, and then he's got like bits of, like, I mean, it looks like a fence, but, you know, sort of like metal webbing and stuff around him. And, you know, it's just horrendous, but in a great way, you know. So the next one I've got is a bit of a left field choice. I actually haven't got anything from the new series on here, much to my shame. Okay. No. More than 30 years in the TARDIS. And I think it's because of the cozy domesticity sort of being broken, and I think it's because it's seeing something that is usually a source of great comfort being sort of messed around with. But also the fact that I just don't like glowing eyes is Sarah Jane heel turning on that little boy, and her eyes glowing green, and In fact, that whole bit as well where Liz Sladen's daughter, when Sadie's walking around that mansion, and then comes to the top of the staircase and the Sontaran stood there and just fucking guns her down. You're thinking about that now, you're like, huh, okay, so Sadie's dead in this world.
Yeah.
We've just seen her get
She
slain
jumped out
by
of the
a
way.
Sontaran.
She jumped out of the way. We didn't see the next bit. If we don't see the body, they might still be alive.
True. So yeah, that's
a good one.
A creepy one for me. I always got kind of visions of coming downstairs and asking mum and dad, like, oh, can I have a glass of water or whatever? And then both sat on the sofa turning and their eyes glowing.
Green eyes. Oh, creepy.
And because there's something from the opening of Goosebumps as well.
Yes, yeah.
The cat on the doorstep, his eyes glowing.
And the dog, isn't it?
And the dog.
Yeah, the Labrador.
Yeah, there's something kind of weird about that I look at it and think, I mean, that isn't really scary, but there's still something in the back of my mind going, that is the scariest thing you've ever seen in your life.
Right. Interesting. Okay. Well, for me, sticking with the 80s and sticking with Colin Baker, Dorf from Mind Warp, the werewolf bloke.
Yeah. Oh my God.
That terrified me as a kid. And you don't sort of can't quite see him. He's like in the shadows a lot. I mean, it's very darkly lit, that story. I think a lot. I think this is probably why I didn't watch much Colin Baker stories not only because we didn't have many on tape, but like the ones that we did have, like Revelation and Trial of a Time Lord, stories like Mind Warp and Revelation they're dark, they're gloomy. And I think as a kid, I was like, oh no, this is also trying to watch Mind Warp in isolation at like 4 years old. You know, it's not going to make any fucking sense. So, no. But yeah, just that always scared me, like the growling and the teeth and the whatever they did to his face. Just again, it's like I said, body horror stuff always gives me the EBGBs. My dad was the same.
Being left to the imagination as well.
Yeah,
If it's a bad, 6th generation VHS tape that's been watched a million times, and which is why that like video studio openings are so creepy. That the tape is getting aligned, the sound sort of out a little bit, and you can't quite see what's going on. The kind of liminal horror aspect of a good VHS opening,
totally.
My next one, all I've written is just Eric Roberts. Full stop. I think that's probably, again, glowing green eyes. And I think watching
Deep Throat
Doctor Who Night, watching Doctor Who Night and then having the TV movie at the end, and watching that for the first time, and it's got Sylve screaming at the end of his hospital scene. It's got the snake creeping around, and it feels like grown-up adult Doctor Who for a 5-year-old who's watching that for the first time. And that whole first experience watching it, thinking this is actually quite scary, but I know it's going to be all right, but this is actually quite freaky. And I didn't watch it voluntarily for a really long time. I would just sort of wake up at the end of falling asleep, putting a VHS on in the evening, and then it's there. I'm halfway through the TV movie and I can't stop now. I'm transfixed, but I don't want to look at it.
You don't look at it. Yeah. I mean, I didn't put it on my list, but it was something that genuinely like made me feel uncomfortable as a child. Was all of the hospital stuff? Really, really freaked me out. And I guess we've talked about this before, is because it feels so real, and obviously Doctor Who's reality is so sort of left of field. Generally speaking, and it all feels like studios and stuff. So it's got that comfort. There's a comfort in the facsimile of it. Do you know what I mean?
Yes.
Of the facade of it all. Whereas this feels like, oh no, we're actually in a hospital, and this is happening to the Doctor, and there's no getting away from it. Horrible. And of course, then that fucking weird bit of the hospital where it's all just like pissing down with rain. What's going on there?
Yeah, fucking American healthcare system. I'll say, as well as a little addition to that shot where Eric Roberts strangles his missus.
Oh yeah, that's horrible.
And the sort of the sound effect of that, and his face, that's unpleasant.
Yeah, and the bit where he like spurts out the acid onto Grace's arm, that's unpleasant. And then he's like, he's spunking on her arm, and then he's like eating the tissues. It's just like, what the fuck is going? I think as a kid, it's just like, what is happening here?
Yeah,
it's all just like unpleasant imagery of just like, this is happening. This is burning, and then he's going, like that.
I think Eric Roberts is just having a moment there,
Yeah. And like even the bit when Grace, when she becomes possessed and she turns around and she's got the black scleral lenses in her eyes, that's creepy. Again, it's like you were saying about Liz Sladen, this character that you sort of feel comfortable with has now suddenly turned to the dark side. And you're like, ooh. Another one from me, the Anti-Man from Planet of Evil. Now, this was a story that I didn't see for a little while, but we had the Tom Baker years on VHS, and one of the clips was the Anti-Man, or Professor Kerensky, if I remember his name, and he goes to evacuate himself. I was going to say. I evacuated myself having watched the clip. No, he goes to eject himself into space because he knows he's becoming infected by the antimatter. And you see the hand, and the hand starts changing, and it's all gnarled and horrible. And then you see the face, and that freaked me the fuck out. I was like, that's horrible. I don't want to watch that story. And then we eventually got it on VHS from, I think, Longleat, if I remember rightly. Why do I remember this mad stuff? And it's fucking scary. He's horrible. He's really, really hideous. So another one that gave me the shivers. That
is going on the list. We'll come to that at some point next year. Bit of Planet of Evil.
Good story.
It is a good story. Absolutely great.
Sort of one that people don't really talk about often.
Exactly.
Annie, I think when a little while ago I watched it with Annie, actually, because Annie had only watched it once when she watched through all of Doctor Who, and she sort of said it was not one that I've gone back and watched. I said, we'll sit down and watch it. It's really good. And she agreed. She was like, oh, actually, this is a really good story.
It's sort of textbook Doctor Who, particularly from that time, isn't it? It's like got a confidence in that they know they can tell that story, but it doesn't, sort of break any molds particularly. I think that's probably why people don't remember it, because a lot of what was happening around that time was, I guess, you've got the gothic horror stuff, and the influence of, Philip Hinchcliffe and Robert Holmes, but that doesn't really feel part of that. It feels like it was commissioned the year before, 2 years before. Yeah,
you can imagine John Pertwee in the location. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Maybe not in sort of like the setting of the story, because it is so sort of dark and gloomy and just feels so desperate, and you don't feel like there's any good is going to come of this.
Absolutely.
It's almost like a Peter Davison story, where you feel like, I can't really see that there's any light at the end of this tunnel.
No.
But
that's how I feel watching most Peter Davisons.
Oh, dear.
I had to get it in. Okay, my next one is another slightly random one, but it is Davros on the cover of the Resurrection of the Daleks VHS.
Yeah, cool. Nice.
Because I remember going into Area 51 in Bristol before they moved up to the top of Gloucester Road, when they were still in their old store, and I don't know, Dad must have had a gig the night before, so he had a bit of cash, and he was like, I'll get you a tape, which one do you want? And I think he wanted
Buxom Brides Volume 3, please.
Sizzling Gypsies Volume 1. I think he was trying to steer me towards that one because it was a Dalek story, I guess.
Oh, the Gypsies one. Oh, right, sorry.
Yeah, the Gypsies, yeah. Buxom Brides. I think he was trying to steer me towards the Dalek one. But I took one look at the cover and I saw Davros's face on it. It's the one where he's sort of bathed in green on the front cover.
Yeah.
And it freaked me out. And I went, I don't, but I'm offering to get it for you. It's like, no, I don't want that one. It's freaking me out. And
your poor dad's like, oh, we'll watch that one.
I wanted to watch well, I know. And what's worse is that for him anyway, the story that I did end up walking away with was Silver Nemesis.
No.
Yeah, he was gutted by that. He doesn't like Sylvester McCoy at all.
Really? Oh, dear.
No, he's always. I think it goes back to when he was living in Dubai for a bit, playing in a hotel, and then.
Wow, this is new information. I never heard this about your dad. No,
he was out in the UAE for like 2 years, maybe slightly longer.
Right.
And he was in a band that played in the restaurant or the bar of this hotel. That was his gig. He had a residency there, but he used to say that they would get episodes of Doctor Who on the TV there dubbed in Arabic.
Right.
And he saw Sylvester McCoy for the first time dubbed in Arabic, which is which I want to see. If anybody's got an Arabic dub of Doctor Who from around that time, then let us know.
Wow.
And so he didn't take to him at all.
Okay, can't understand a word you're saying.
I know he's Scottish, but fucking hell.
This accent's a bit heavy.
So he never got on with Sylvester McCoy. Never thought he was a good actor. And I think a bit of him died the day I decided I wanted Silver Nemesis rather than Resurrection of the Daleks. But that image, I can still see it on the shelf, and I don't know what it was about it now that freaked me out, because look at it now and it's like, it's just Davros. There's nothing really that's shocking about it. But
it's funny though, isn't it? And like how just certain images just have a certain effect on you, like you said, even though you might be used to it in a different context. And I think the other thing is like these shops back in the day, they were also gloomy and dingy. I mean, Area 51, is around the corner from where we live, and I popped in there a little while ago, and it's still grubby and dingy and stuff. So I can imagine as a little kid seeing that on the shelf, sort of in the semi-darkness. It would freak you out, and it probably smelled like tobacco smoke and bloody weed
in the gloom of dope smoke, and people stood around talking about X-Files and things that I wasn't old enough to watch at that age. I do miss that old sci-fi store vibe. When I was in Melbourne last year, I went into a store, I forgot the name of it, but they had a couple of Doctor Who things in there, and I think I took some photos for you of like Masters of the Universe sets they had in the window and stuff. But I walked in, and it was like every sci-fi store you ever walk into, zero hint of customer service. Like nobody saying "all right" when you walk in. And 4 blokes stood around the counter. You can't quite tell who works there and who's just the mate. Talking about something, and invariably the conversation will turn to how beautiful Gillian Anderson is, or have you read that Harley Quinn novel where she gets her tits out, or something like that. Something that's the scariest thing that I think we've referenced in this entire episode so far is that image.
But we've all seen it. We've all been there. We've all seen
been
it.
There. We've probably all been those people.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. I mean, when I went to Area 51, they were all there chatting about D&D stuff, and I was just like, I was like, quick, get me out of here.
These are not my people.
No.
So yeah,
stepped into a foreign land.
I'll put Area 51 on the list. If you're going to Bristol, there are there's Forbidden Planet and Area 51
it's still shut. It's still shut down.
Is it really?
It hasn't opened since it burnt down last Christmas.
Oh,
it still isn't
that's
open.
not a good sign, is it?
It's not a good sign. I think they're gearing up to reopen because they've finally taken down like the boards off the windows. You can actually see in the shop now. It's empty. They've gutted it, and I guess they're going to do like a whole new revamp of it. But my God, every time I go past it, I'm like, I probably won't even go in there to buy anything, but sometimes it's just nice to pop in and just have a look and say, that looks good,
Absolutely.
Not spend any money, but
So there's not many shops like that left in Bristol anymore, like that sci-fi shop. There's one in Glastonbury that's quite good.
Yeah, the one in Glastonbury's good, and that is like that old school sort of shop because shit is just piled up on top of each other. There's no shelf space for anything, so they're like, just chuck it in the corner, and who knows what you might find under there?
Who knows? And they've got no like POS system, so everything is just like stick it up, and they'll put the price into an old till, and it's like going in and like if you close your eyes, this has gone completely off track talking about horror things, but it's kind of related because it's that kind of sticky, dank. sci-fi shop thing.
Yeah.
Whenever I think of whenever I think of sci-fi shots around that time, for some reason I close my eyes and I see posters for like Star Trek Nemesis and movies from around the kind of 90s. And those
Species and things like that.
And Millennium and Evolution. Was that movie with the smiley face on the cover? And David Duchovny and everywhere on the walls and stuff. And then fucking flashback. Crazy times. Anyway, your
Great
turn.
Days. My turn. So a story we can't actually watch, but I think this might have been a Doctor Who night. I can't remember where I would have first seen this clip. But it's from the Faceless Ones. No, it's not from the Faceless Ones. Forget that. It's from Fury from the Deep. It's Mr. Oak and Mr. Quill when they go into that lady's bedroom and they gas her with their mouths.
Yeah.
Absolutely horrifying. I remember watching it thinking... With their gingivitis, yeah. A couple of Tic Tacs, that would have sorted that out. It just... The horror of it is just so horrible. And because it's in black and white, their mouths are sort of like weirdly dark moles, and it's just very creepy. And I remember seeing it and showing it to Mum and being like, what do you think about this? And she was like, that's horrible. And I was like, yeah, that's from an old Doctor Who. It doesn't exist anymore. And she was like, yeah, good.
But amazing that segment survived, because that is the most iconic moment. And it's probably the scariest thing that came out of the 60s. That and I didn't put it on the list. And Jimmy Savile. That, I didn't put it on the list, but Katarina dying in the Daleks' Master Plan.
Yeah.
Particularly Peter Purvis's performance. And again, that sense of desperation and doom and gloom. Like, this isn't like an adventure we've seen before. Like, people are just going to get killed off, you know?
Yeah, and I think that bit as well, what makes it more horrible is, like, she's not even being attacked by a monster.
No.
You know, it's a bloke, you know, it's just a horrible man, and it just makes it feel that little bit more
And that it happens
icky.
off screen as well, you know, you just hear the noise of the airlock opening or whatever, and gross.
Even,
my last one on my list, I didn't purposefully not pick stuff from the new series, but I think short of things I've mentioned before, body horror wise, like the Teller melting people's heads, or obvious things like Weeping Angels, and there's a couple that came up on the list of submissions from people on Twitter, which we'll go through in a minute, and some of those were fantastic. Bits that I'd completely forgotten about. But I'm going to go for a big finish. So it is from the 21st century, and I'm going to say the whole of, but particularly certain segments from the Holy Terror, which I think is probably one of the best Big Finish audio dramas ever.
Yeah, it's fantastic.
Robert Sherman, so it's obviously fantastic. Colin Baker, right at the start of the whole Big Finish thing, so that's obviously fantastic. And that's got a lot of gore and body horror in it. It's probably the most gruesome thing I've heard on audio, considering the fact that you obviously don't see anything.
Yeah.
But the sound design in it is quite something.
Yeah.
And the way that, oh, my father, the way that character speaks all the way through it is fucking grim.
Yeah.
So yeah, that for me is up there in terms of what Doctor Who can do on audio to make things really frightening.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of those early Big Finishes, they were, you know, they didn't have to not be scary. You know, they could push it as far as they wanted. So yeah, stuff like Jubilee, Spare Parts, you know, they've all sort of, they all have moments where you're a bit like, oh dear, this is a bit unpleasant. Did you see, speaking of Spare Parts, did you see that they're doing the David Banks, the adaptation from the David Banks book, Genesis of the Cybermen? They're doing the adaptation of Jerry Davis's original idea. You know what I'm talking about?
Yes.
No.
Good for them.
That bloody book. And it sort of feels like, well, why? We've got Spare Parts. Do we need to have like another version of this?
Yeah, but while you can still trim the marks and make a couple of bucks from a script that you probably didn't have to pay for, he probably gave an expiration year payment to his widow of 250 quid. And,
yeah, true.
Can we have the script?
Yeah. I worry it's going to be like that Genesis of the Daleks one that they did, where everyone was like, "This is fucking dog shit." It was basically like, "Here's episode 1," and then the rest of the story was, "Now go watch Genesis of the Daleks."
I can't believe they got away with that.
What
honestly,
were they thinking? Oh, insane!
This must be different. This has to be different.
It has to be different.
No business would rightly kind of go, "Let's do that again."
Yeah.
Fucking hell, that might be the scariest thing we've actually mentioned.
They probably think, fuck it. We know that they're going to pay for it, and that's it.
Yeah, they'll buy it.
Yeah.
As long as we can cover the costs of,
the lunch.
Yeah, there you go. That's much better than what I was going to say. Right, do you want to do another one, and then we'll turn to Twitter?
I don't know. The only one that I could really think of that used to creep me out was George Cranley from Black Orchid.
Oh,
Scarping about the house going...
Yeah.
That freaked me the fuck out.
That is grim.
Yeah.
That's one that doesn't strike me as particularly scary because most of it happens in the broad daylight in the English summertime and it's all very spiffy and, jolly hockey sticks and all that. But that is creepy.
It is creepy. Probably wouldn't get made today. They'd probably say you can't do that because this man has been tortured and disfigured and is mentally deranged.
Not very well. Yeah.
But
well, it was a different time.
Different time, yeah.
Great days.
Great days, better for it. Didn't do us any harm.
As they say, twitching in the corner. Right.
Yeah.
Let's turn to Twitter. We got loads of submissions, so we'll try and get through as many of these as possible. Christopher Clark, as a child, Stengos's head in the Dalek freaked me out, of course.
Yeah.
But also the Stones of Blood campus attack was very hammer horror scary.
Yes. Yeah.
That's another story we need to go back to. But it's difficult doing anything from that season because you kind of feel like you want to do a key to time arc.
Yeah. Like a saga. I guess Stones of Blood is sort of... maybe one of the more detached ones, I guess.
Maybe we could get away with that.
Yeah.
At Sarah is the sad. Despite it being from a missing episode, it has become the most enduring images of 60s Doctor Who. It's a gif of Mr. Quill. Hugh David's direction, Bill Burridge's face, the music, and honourable mention to the episode 3 cliffhanger when Maggie walks into the sea. I wish I could unsee that. Or see that.
Yeah.
What else?
You pardon the pun?
Pardon the... Very good. Very good. We got this one a couple of times. The Zygon jump scare from the end of part 1 of Terror of the Zygons.
Very good. Yeah, that's another really good one. That's horrible.
Great moment.
That's really horrible. What a great way to reveal the monster. That real quick glimpse of this horrible thing. This like
instantly iconic and the noise that it makes.
Thing. Yeah. Brilliant. God, they were cooking back in those days. They really knew what they were doing.
They absolutely did. And also like, Liz Sladen's, you know, her kind of like gasp scream that she's really good at.
Yeah.
My mum finds it a bit cringy watching it. She gets a bit like, oh, stop making that noise. But she finds a way of tapping into exactly what your reaction would be in that moment of the kind of your breath is sort of taken away by the shock of it. Yeah. And then you're like, this thing looks fucking scary. You know, it's such a great performance.
Yeah, brilliant.
Loza Ray. I've never seen anything that particularly scared me in Doctor Who, but the scene where the Autons come to life in Spearhead from Space is a little bit creepy. A couple from the Seeds of Doom.
Yes,
waiting for the pod to open when Sarah Jane has her arm held down.
That's horrible.
And obviously...
It's stuff like that where it's just like vindictively unpleasant. Do you know what I mean?
Absolutely.
Yeah. You know, it's not necessarily like a horrible monster, but it's just humans being vindictively shit. It's just...
awful people.
Yeah.
Eva Seriton says, this thing looks so cute. And it's the baby Shimmeron from Delta and the Bannerman. But when she was hatching it, it scared the shit out of 7-year-old me.
Aww. I mean, it is grim. It is grim, actually. When you see it pop out and it's all glistening and, you know.
It is pretty gross looking. Yeah.
Naff.
Max Blake, Night Terrors was the last story to proper freak me out as a kid. Kind of middling to bad episode overall, but the scene where the landlord gets turned into a doll had me behind the sofa. And I'd completely forgotten about that scene, but I have
forgotten about that scene. What?
I went back and looked at some screenshots from it. And that is a fucking creepy looking moment, that. I must go back and watch that. So maybe that'll go down on the list and we'll go back and watch. Because it was shot in Bristol, so...
It was shot in Bristol, yeah.
We'll have to go back and experience that.
I'll go and film my half of the podcast from there, shall I?
Yeah, in the flat. So go on
location. Yeah. I will get me a
how long you last. Guy Lambert. For me, it's not about monsters, it's about tone. Season 22 is the most downbeat season and what feels like the most sinister in the sense there's no hope, embodied in Perry's recurring state of despair. Series 9 often has that vibe too, an optimism-scarce Doctor Who that evokes our true fears. I think the lack of optimism in season 9 is down to something else, personally, Guy, but thanks very much.
I was about to say that.
Oliver Chinnery. I think the Cybermen in the Series 2 two-parter are shot really creepily at times, especially the ones in the tunnel and also the ones stalking Jackie. There's quite a few jump scares from the Cybermen at times in those eps. I do remember actually watching it and obviously knowing what the Cybermen are like, and these ones move in that kind of, really jerky motion. And those scenes where they're infiltrating the what's his name? Lumin? Lupus? Lumic. Lumin. When they're infiltrating that big building and they're travelling through the tunnels and the Cybermen are all lined up against the wall. They're just knowing at any point one of them is going to
start. They're going to start waking up. Yeah, it's great.
Neil speaking. I was actually scared when I first saw Scariest when City of Death came out on video. Yeah. That first shot of him in the ship with the zoom into his eye haunted me for months. Dr. Stew, for me, it's the scene of the Silurians where the Silurian plague starts taking effect at the train station.
That is horrible. Yeah. And also, like, going back to what I was saying about Inferno, the POV shots from, like, the first couple of episodes of the Silurians, those creep me out as well, because there's a very similar sound. The heavy breathing is very similar to the Primords.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, just seeing it, like, because it's that bit where it goes into the barn and it's nighttime and it's raining. And you kind of don't really see anything else like that in Doctor Who. But it feels like a horror film at that point, and it just sort of feels like, oh my god, there's this scary thing, and it's creeping around in the dark, and it's
for me, the scariest part of that story is when the Doctor's in the cottage and it just walks in.
Yes, yeah,
because there is a slight element of, I think you've walked into the wrong house, mate. But also how nonchalant it is.
Yeah.
And the fact you've been waiting to sort of see it that whole time, and then it's not in the cave, it's in your living room.
Your lounge.
It's in your lounge helping itself to, a box of Quality Street.
Yeah.
This is very tasty. And then the young one comes in and says, "You've eaten all the red ones." James, girl woman walking towards the camera at the start of Unquiet Dead. My earliest memory of watching new Who episodes, I was about 4. In general, the Gelth are scary, especially the behind-the-scenes photos of the makeup and the one dead in the morgue with purple feet. I forgot about that.
Yeah, I remember when that aired thinking, ooh, this is quite spooky. And my cousin was at the house at the time. I don't know how old he would have been. No, he's a year younger than you. So... Yeah, so he would have been your age, and I remember he saw it, and he was like, this is horrible. Like, he'd never really been exposed to anything like that before.
No.
So I think it sort of gave him the creeps a bit.
I love that story. It's such a great, example of, Dickensian ghost, aesthetic. Like the whole, when he's in even when he's in the theatre and the lights start going weird, and it is a creepy story. And when they're in the morgue and It is.
And they start coming alive, and they start getting. It's a great story. I love The Unquiet Dead. That's a great one.
That's going on the list as well. Then excellent. The Northern Dalek, the empty child on the opposite side of the window, scared the fuck out of me as a kid to the point I refused to go near the show till series 2 aired. It was the first bit of footage I saw from the show. Obviously, you know, they're so famous and so classic a horror moment in Doctor Who that it kind of goes without saying the empty child and obviously by extension the Weeping Angels and stuff. But, you know, it is still the case that if you ask anybody my age, your age, about Doctor Who at the time and what scared them, the empty child or the gas mask kid is always the first one that's brought up.
It's always that. It's always the Are You My Mummy? You know, people remember that stuff. Yeah, very good.
And particularly the bit where the Doctor realises the tape has run out.
Oh, yes, that's a very good moment. That's a very good moment. And obviously the transformation of Victor Meldrew into gas mask. Yeah.
Great, that bit. Cosmic Hobo, the Cybermen first appearing on the 10th planet, is a visually haunting, iconic moment.
Yeah, really good.
Supposed former review junkie, the Auton cop face reveal in Terror of the Autons.
Yeah.
Great.
Another great one.
Somebody also mentioned the jump scare of the Auton in the vault, in the safe.
Oh, yeah, that's cool. Yeah.
In Michael Wish's office.
Yeah.
They're weird in that story because you don't really see an awful lot of the classic boiler-suited Autons.
No.
Because they've got new helmets, obviously.
Yeah. They're not as good. I don't like them as much.
There's something creepy about the fact that it's totally smooth, but also something not as creepy because it's removed from trying to look as human and sculpted as possible.
Yeah.
But their voices are creepy. I don't like their voices.
Oh yeah, they talk, didn't they, in that one? Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I like the carnival head. I feel like they shouldn't talk. I agree. I feel like they shouldn't talk. And the carnival heads, you know, they're great as well when they've got those on. Yeah.
The soup scene in Ghostlight.
Soup scene. Oh yes. Yeah.
I can't remember that.
The primordial soup. Yeah. Oh god. Yeah. Don't have the soup. When they all sit round for dinner and they put it's the policeman, isn't it? The policeman's been turned into the soup. Yeah.
I remember. Gotta go with Curse of Fenric, says Dennis Manning.
Yeah.
Very creepy. I think like getting older and realizing that they're supposed to be bloated, like rotting corpses. Yeah. And that's where the blue comes from and the sort of gnarled, obviously the barnacle element too. Yeah. But realizing that somebody's done the research and has obviously turned it up to 11, but has gone, what does a bloated body look like? Yeah. And they've done a great job with the makeup in that story. It's fantastic.
You know? Yeah, amazing. Great. I mean, that whole era is so good for monsters. But yeah, Ghostlight, actually, you know, that always creeped me out. You know, the whole hearing control down in the cellar. It's, you know, it's the atmosphere of it is so spooky. And then seeing the husks creeping around at the end of episode 1.
The husks. I didn't know what the context was behind the husks, but the first time I saw them was in the Doctor Who exhibition in Llangollen.
Yeah.
And we took photos of everything that was in there, and for some reason it was always the photos of the husks looking back afterwards that creeped me out. Yeah. And then this is another real deep cut scary moment, because obviously they're scary in situ, like in the story, but also in the making of Ghostlight. There's a couple of moments where they have these flashes of lightning.
Oh, I remember. Yeah.
Behind the talking heads, you get the husks in the flash of lightning, which is quite creepy. Cracker's props and design. As a kid, the pure look of terror in Sylve's face when the Dalek starts gliding up the stairs. Yeah,
that's one of Jonathan's scary moments. And the green, you know, I think he always says the fact that his face looks all weird in the green, and he's it's very cool.
There may or may not have been a small amount of trauma to the cliffhanger in Warriors of the Deep, where you see Pete Davidson's lifeless body floating.
Nice. Interesting.
That's an interesting one.
That's an interesting one.
Mentions of the empty child being particularly traumatizing. The cold open of Hungry Earth, says Josh, frightened me to death back when it aired. I guess that's the guy happens? Being dragged into the soil.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Tractators.
That's not convinced. Tractators. Brony Dan, for me,
those dribble. That frightened me.
For me, the scariest moment in Doctor Who is the Satan Pit when they're being chased by the Ood in the ventilator shaft.
Yeah, I mean, Satan Pit is a fantastically creepy story. I remember watching it and thinking, my God, this is great. You know, I wonder what the last... I guess it's a shame, really, because I feel like the season finale we just had could have really lent into that stuff really well, because the way that they did the Servants of Sutek were great. You know, the fact that Sutek was now this great big creature, and it just didn't go there, and it's a shame. I feel like they missed a trick. I mean, I feel like they missed many tricks. Yeah, but hey ho.
I think maybe it was the fact that obviously we attribute that era of Doctor Who, Sutek, to the gothic horror element of Doctor Who, and the fact that it was just big shiny office building in the centre of London with a big dog in it. And I wasn't, apart from Susan Twist's makeup, I wasn't particularly convinced or freaked out by the other like half-face skeletal makeup, because it kind of reminded me of those plastic farmyard animal masks you used to get. Yeah. You know, just kind of obviously beautifully blended in, but the fact that it's only covering that sort of like square was a little bit like, you know, I don't know.
Yeah, it was more
glowing
effective
eyes,
on
which
Susan
is
Twist.
creepy as well.
Yeah, glowing eyes,
But yeah, I know what you mean. I think that goes back a little bit to Russell talking about if we made the show without the Disney budget, it would be, you know, creepy ghost stories every week and all that sort of stuff. And it's like, you know, but
don't do one of the other.
Those. Yeah. Chuck us one of those every so often, you know?
Yeah.
Oh well. George Sahora is all about frogs, which is certainly a name. At the end of Planet of Evil 2, when the Doctor fell into what I thought at the time of as the pit, but which the novelisation described as the black pool, I think I had a bottomless pit phobia as a kid. But the black pool, that is a frightening place to go. Much like quicksand, it seemed like much more of a real threat back then. Remember back in the day when quicksand would actually kill people?
Yeah.
When kids could roam free, didn't have to worry about your neighbour being a nonce, but they'd end up getting hit by a train or electrocuted by a pylon. They didn't watch those public information films back in the day. Kids were fine. It was fine. The Celestial Toy Gazer, the guy sinking into the floor in Night Terrors. I don't remember that. I think that's is that the unpleasant landlord bloke?
Oh yeah, I remember. Yeah. And his dog.
Because when I saw that,
the dog's all right, isn't it? The dog's okay.
The dog's all right. When I saw that before, when I was going through the list, I thought of everybody getting pulled into the floor in Flatline. That was quite creepy.
Oh yeah, that was good. Yeah.
But that's more of like, oh, that's a cool.
Yeah.
I don't know if it changes because you get older, but you're like, oh, that's a cool death, or that's a cool like scene, you know?
Yeah.
Rather than it being scary necessarily. Like, what would scare you now in Doctor Who besides the prospect of it coming back? What would scare you? What is the kind of thing that gets you now?
Don't know. I don't know. I mean, I guess it's hard. Have you got an answer for this? I mean, I think like I was saying, I think Empire of Death could have gone there. You know, I think if it had gone into that whole. It was a shame because they built up this like this Satan pit type energy, especially at the end of that cliffhanger, where you know she's giving off all this rhetoric about he's this, that, and the other, and you know the music's building and blah 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 blah, and you sort of think, this could be going into like satanic areas here, quite demonic.
anyone's going to be phoning up complaining of that, you know? Like,
no.
Why not just go for easy targets, you know? Like,
yeah.
And everybody finds that sort of gothic, coven-y kind of thing creepy.
Yeah, you know, it's easy material to work with. So yeah, it something like that would have been great, but it just didn't go there.
No.
Yeah, I don't know. It would have to be something that made me feel uneasy, I guess. Like that sort of creeping. I like a lot of folk horror-y stuff, but yeah, I don't know really. It's hard, I guess, especially as an adult. But I mean, I think if it was something like body horror, like you said, body horror still freaks me out today. But again, I don't think they quite go that far. Not anymore.
I think that's probably a form of horror that they would steer clear from the most, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
For me, obviously, it's body horror. I think what I will say, obviously, we kind of have been taking the mick out of the finale of this last season. But 73 Yards, I think, was the first time in a long time Doctor Who had creeped me out. Because of the woman, obviously, and the sort of the fact you can't get away from her, which sort of taps into the whole Cybermen thing of they will keep coming for you regardless of what situation you're in. They won't stop until they hunt you down. It's sort of like It Follows, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
But particularly in that story, when you were talking about folk horror, I was thinking about when Ruby goes to the pub and how unwilling people are to really help. It kind of reminds me of the bit in American Werewolf in London where they go to the pub and the sense that you're not actually safe there. They could turf you out and you're fucked and you wouldn't be allowed back in and you're in a remote location, you know, that sort of thing.
Yeah, and I mean, stuff like Midnight, you know, that's a great
people
story.
People turning on each other.
And it's the people turning on each other. And that is scary, you know, that is something that we can all imagine and be like, oh, shit, you know. Yeah. So that's, you know, Doctor Who, especially modern Doctor Who, is very good with its cerebral horror, you know, stuff like this, stuff like the Are You My Mummy? And, like you said, 73 Yards. Yeah, so, I don't know, I just wish Doctor Who would lean more into the spookiness these days. I feel like, at least with this last season, I feel like we've sort of lost a bit of that.
I agree.
Which is a shame. Although we sort of had it with Wild Blue Yonder. You know, Wild Blue Yonder really sort of played with that.
Was sort of, that was a body horror thing. And when you think of like this generation, sound like a fucking old head saying that, but you know, when you look at what creeps them out, it's stuff that is intended to be cozy or stuff that is not intended to be scary, coming across in a scary way, like you know, animatronic robots in a pizzeria. You know, that has become just like a whole fucking franchise within itself. I think as well, the thing that story that Wild Blue Yonder dealt in, which Doctor Who could tap into more, is the liminal horror of, you know, kind of yawning spaces and featureless environments where you can kind of impose any feeling onto a space. It's not that it's trying to be cozy or it's trying to be frightening. It is just, there's a blandness and a nothingness to it. Like a story like The God Complex, that's kind of got a liminal element to it because you've got all these big corridors and so on. I think for me, in terms of stuff that I find really spooky, is stuff like The Haunting of Hill House, where you don't realise what you're looking at until it makes a move, or the implied element of, and I'm sure that it worked really well for Netflix because they went, man, we can get so many articles out of this. Is the whole, how many ghosts did you spot in that last episode? Knowing that they're there and knowing that at any point something could happen. Being in that, oh shit, like my chair falling over. That is a rolling theme. I want a compilation of my chair slipping out from underneath me. Knowing that could kick off at any moment, and I think we've spoken about it before. Is like gaping maws always creep me out. That's horrible. And I guess again, that's like Wild Blue Yonder. You know, the doctor's mouth slowly, you know,
elongating. Yeah, it's stuff like that. I would I'd love them to tap into that kind of stuff a bit more, because I feel like there really anything. I guess actually the bogey monster was a cool piece of design. You know, I guess to a kid that could be quite scary.
Stell hates Tim Shaw. She hates the teeth in the face.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to think of like kind of more modern, creepy. I didn't write it down, but I probably should have. Can You Hear Me? That sort of horror of like, why the fuck are his fingers floating? And that whole thing where it's like dream or nightmare logic, where there's no rhyme or reason for what you're seeing, and it's actually quite hard to describe why you find it creepy. Like when you explain a nightmare to somebody the morning after, you're like, oh, why was that scary? Unless it's something like something was chasing me. It's like, why did I feel uneasy in that space? It's like when Doctor Who taps into that middle ground of, I'm not sure why this is frightening, but it is. Like clowns. You know, they're not supposed to be frightening, but there's something, you know, the
inherently
smile
unpleasant about them. Yeah,
because I know that you're not like that all the time. I know you can't be happy and cheery and smiling all the time. So what's going on? You know. A few more submissions. Lazarus says the flood and the Vashta Narada.
Oh yeah, of course, the flood. The flood is fantastic. Yeah.
The Cybermen chase scene in series 2 gave me nightmares. I think something to do with them walking / marching creeping me out. Like they knew they would catch you, so they didn't have to try too hard. I think, you've said that. Livy at Cynical Who has a photo of the Reverend with a banana in his mouth. That is a creepy moment where that is horrible.
That is horrible, grim. Yeah. And I think even just seeing Josiah, like the skin like peeling off of him and he's just like getting all manky. It's just unpleasant, isn't it?
It's like he knows it's a means to an end. But like how ill he is. Yeah. And that he's sort of relishing, like he knows that this is supposed to happen to get to that next
stage. Yeah.
Horrible. Definitely Who Turned Out the Lights in Silence of the Library. Paul says Sarah Jane possessed by the Androvax in the Sarah Jane adventure story Prisoner of the Jadoon. I've got no reference point for that whatsoever. No. Plant-based body horror in the Seeds of Doom.
Yes, the bit where that always freaked me out from Seeds of Doom is when he's transforming into the crinoid and he's tied to the bed and he's saying to Sarah, he's like, "Oh, you want me to die? You want me to die?" It's just like, man, this is horrible, and this is for kids. It's like, what is going on?
For me, it's the blanket being whipped off and seeing his body for the first time. Because that looks like a tropical skin disease. You know what I mean? That looks like something that somebody showed you in IT when you were 11 and has been burnt into your brain. Like, that's a real person, you know? The troll doll from Terror of the Autons has popped up here.
Oh, yeah.
As well. Ed Jones has just sent us a screenshot of Doctor Who Live, the after party. And Susanna Emily 02. Not sure if you're counting spin-off, but Odd Bob the Clown from the Sarah Jane Adventures.
Oh, yeah.
Forget Torchwood gore / slasher. The clown was far more fear-based than psychological. Main series, aside from Blink and The Empty Child, etc., I'd say Stones of Blood, a very underrated serial, particularly the campfire scene.
Yeah.
I mean, I think the thing we've learnt here is obviously there's tentpole moments that freaks everybody out as a Doctor Who fan.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
But also how many sides Doctor Who can kind of assault you from a horror perspective. That you've got the kind of out and out, that looks grim. You've got the jump scares. You've got the liminal horror. You've got the gothic horror and the folk horror. The fact that it kind of takes all of those in. And yet that was like a week to week thing. It's like, okay, what kind of horror are we getting this week?
Yes.
Whereas now it's aliens by their nature, or like an invasion by its nature, isn't necessarily frightening or scary.
No.
But it seems like they just kind of pick and choose, like, 3 of the 6 or 3 of the 7 this season will be scary ones.
Yeah.
But that's always sort of been Doctor Who's MO. It's what's made it memorable for so many people, is that it's scary week to week. And it sears itself on your brain.
Yeah, you're right. And it feels like it's kind of lost that, unless you're like some sort of angry boomer and you tune into bloody whatever the second episode was this season, you see Jinx Monsoon, and then that'll probably frighten you.
Probably. Oh, Stella said that as well. Stella said Jinx Monsoon and the makeup as you get through that story, and she becomes more kind of demonic with the teeth and the eyes and stuff.
Yeah. I mean, it has its moments, doesn't it? But it would be nice to. I love hearing the stories of like back in the 70s when you see oh god, what's his name? The designer. Oh dear, what faux pas? The guy who did the design for Planet of Evil and Roger Murray Leach.
Oh
and
yeah,
they're talking about stuff like the Deadly Assassin, and they're talking about doing the Master's face, and they sort of say like, oh, we were working on it, and we were like, oh my god, is this too far? And they're just like, fuck it, scare the little bastards, and that's what I kind of want. I just want them to just go, who gives a shit?
I understand that there is an element of, because we know it happened in the classic series as well, like with the spiders in Planet of the Spiders and stuff, where they would take an idea and go, that's too much. And it happened in New Earth with the patients. It happened
because they could have been really scary, couldn't they? Some of those initial designs,
And when they were redesigning the Cybermen, and
they always go hard when they were the Cybermen. They were like, let's make them fucking scary.
That's the way to go, isn't it? It's like you go as far, you push it and find out what is it that makes that thing scary, and then you keep that element, but you scale back on the nightmare fuel. But then at the same time, that's kind of what it's all about. Like, I don't like the idea of somebody having an aversion to telling stories because it gives off an element of the show being cheap, or the show being not a massive swashbuckling space opera week to week. And Doctor Who is all things to all people, but at its core, whenever you ask people the things that stick with them, it isn't necessarily regenerations. I mean, they're obviously a tentpole moment. It isn't necessarily the fluffy, funny lines of dialogue. It's that thing kept me awake for months. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't think of blank in the same way again.
Totally.
And I don't know if there's an aversion to it, but it feels like the kind of show that Doctor Who is now, and the kind of show they've been making, sort of doesn't have that as a priority, whereas it used to be a priority of the show.
Yeah, totally. I mean, like, especially talking to people of an older generation, like people who aren't fans, like I said about my dad's mate. I remember when my mum was having a bathroom fitted, and a guy came round and saw the Doctor Who memorabilia, and he was like, oh yeah, I used to watch Doctor Who as a kid. And the old classic, he said, oh, the one that really terrified me was the one with the giant maggots. And it's like, it's like you said, it's those things that stick in people's heads. It's a shame that so they just don't sort of think that way anymore. And I mean, like you said, it doesn't need to be a scary story every week, but it'd be nice to sort of know that that's there,
Yeah. Like the Chulda from the last season gone. I don't know, the cosplay villains.
Oh, the bird people. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I think they're called the Chulda. They like. I'm not scared of owls. I'm not scared of owls. But I understand people are.
It just reminded me of that fast show sketch where he's like, in the dark, in a hole with an owl.
But I get there's a creepiness to them, particularly when they do a 360 and their eyes are big and
Oh, see, that would have been good. Can you imagine that? That would have been a fucking great moment if Molly, I was going to say, what's her name? Ruby.
Ruby.
Millie, that's her, isn't it? That's the name of the actress. If she'd have been sneaking past one of those buggers and the head did a 360, did a whip round, whoa.
But like having a feathery face is sort of like, well, that's not that frightening, What if you'd gone for something that people are scared of? What if they were like insectoid-y things, or, you know, chameleons or something, or whatever it was, you know. It just, you know, the design element, I think, first and foremost for things like that has to be, you have to scare kids.
Yeah.
But I don't know who's scared of that, you know?
No, I mean, I think if it was like more of like a gnarled sort of bird, like when birds lose their feathers, and like baby birds, when they haven't got any feathers, they're pretty grim and horrible. Or like vultures, you know, sort of buzzardy birds, you know, those sorts of things have been good. Maybe if they started off beautiful, and that was again part of the whole cosplay thing, that they were supposed to look beautiful, but underneath it all, they were these horrible creatures. Well.
But this is the thing, you know, Doctor Who is now up against, you know, stuff like Wednesday, which has that gothic horror element to it, you know.
Yeah. I've watched the first couple of episodes and I was like, well, didn't do it for me.
Not for me either. It's not my cup of tea.
Is there any scary things in that? I don't know.
I think there's a bit where someone gets mauled by a werewolf, or like there's a werewolf stalking somebody in a forest in a later episode that was quite creepy. But you know, that's got a gothic horror vibe to it, and that's just uneasy generally, you know, elements of that. But we are living in a world where, you know, I was thinking the other day, I thought nothing of gunning people down in an airport in the No Russian mission in Modern Warfare 2. When I open Twitter to do something on the Review of Death account, because I don't use Twitter anymore, that's the only reason I open it, and the first thing I get on the For You feed is videos of people picking up infant baby parts in Gaza.
Oh, yeah.
You know, like, it's hard to scare people these days because the real world is scary enough.
Yeah.
You know, not to put too much pressure on our American viewers, but, you know, you've got a presidential election coming up. That could be fucking terrifying.
Yeah.
So I think Doctor Who sort of jumping into things that are scary but that don't exist, you know, not having, you know, as scary as the right wing are, and a politician like Roger Ap Gwilliam, you know, but like, he's a handsome dude, you know, unless he turns around and his eyes start glowing, you know, that'll get me. But
then even that, they didn't really push it far enough to really hit home how much of an arsehole he was. And I think that's what it is. I think they missed the mark a little bit there, because I think we all expected years and years, and we didn't get that, and that was kind of a shame. I wouldn't be
surprised if he comes back, though. I wouldn't be surprised if that's a longer running thing.
I hope so.
You know, it felt like that was like, well, he got away. You know, like Russell wouldn't let that happen, or you know, wouldn't incarcerate him, or he'd kill him off if the intention wasn't to do something later. He always likes leaving threads like that.
Yeah, so I hope that is the case, because otherwise it will feel just like a bit of a that was a lost, missed opportunity.
But I get that it's hard to frighten people these days, and you know, but I'd rather be frightened by something shambling coming out of the fog like Silent Hill. I can't fucking wait to play that remake, by the way. But you know, that scares me. Silent Hill scares me. Yeah. And you don't get anything like Doctor Who doing creepy stuff like that. Besides, I guess, 73 Yards, and I'm sure there's plenty of other examples that I can think of. But it would be nice if Doctor Who got back to that. Yeah.
Definitely. Well, I think that's all there is to say on the spookiness of Doctor Who in time for Halloween. Enjoy yourselves out there. I don't know anyone who's going to be going out and listen to this podcast, so ignore what I just said. So out of the spookiness, what are we off to next? Where are we going?
Well, we're not out of the spooky woods yet, particularly over on Patreon, because we have got a Halloween special coming up on Halloween night, on All Hallows Eve. You'll want to be around from about 9 p.m. To join us in a very spooky commentary, which I'm very excited for. But once we're done with that, tapping back into the creepy cerebral elements of Doctor Who with a review of a story we should have done ages ago. We should have done more of these Doctor stories this year, but we didn't. Yeah. We're finally getting around to it. We're going to do The Mind Robber.
Nice.
Which I'm very excited about. And as mentioned, Happiness Patrol. As we get into December, I mean, things might change, but I was racking my brain. I was like, what is there, that isn't a Christmas special that's got a sort of Christmassy edge to it? And we mentioned it earlier, but since we mentioned Stengos, we'll do Revelation of the Daleks before Christmas.
Oh, nice.
Because, cool. It's snowy and all of that.
Yeah.
So
is that or Season Doom?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So, we'll do some kind of cold related Doctor Who.
Very good.
And yeah, there you go.
Lovely stuff. Well, thank you all for watching and listening, everybody. We will see you all then for The Mind Robber. A story that is highly ranked, but a story that I like it, but I've never been like in love with it. So be interesting to discuss with you in a fortnight's time. So yeah, thank you everyone. We will see you then. Ciao for now. Bye bye.
Bye bye.